Hey everybody, my name is Michael from Polygon Island, and today I'm making a tutorial on PBR texturing, or physically based rendering, or physically based rendered textures. Um, PBR is really good for photorealistic textures because it takes how a texture would look in real life in your render. So that basically means that it takes all the reflective properties, the diffuse properties, and plus the actual texture itself to make a physically based rendered texture. So a lot of people don't know where to get these kind of textures for free. Polygon is obviously a really good paid site that I believe Blender Guru owns, but they're paid. So not a lot of people who just start out with Blender want to pay a subscription or just pay for textures, especially if they're just starting out, because you don't know if you're going to stick with it yet. Now, a lot of people know about the site, a lot of people don't, so I'm going to go cover it, and along with this tutorial. It's cc0textures.com, and it's a completely free texture site where you can download a ton of PBR textures. Right now there's 632. I believe they're adding more every single day. So when I started using this, it was about like 400-ish. So they've added a lot more. But basically what you do is you go through here, and then you can like check out whatever category. They have like stones, bricks, carpet, ice, leaves. I'm gonna go ahead and pick this one over here. It's a new release, and it's some planks. Now, the resolution of your textures that you're going to download depends entirely on where the texture is going to be placed in your project and if it's a focus object. Now, usually, if it's in the background, like off in the background, you're not going to see it, go 2K, because you don't need that extra resolution if you're not going to see it. If it's in the foreground, but it's not the focus, like if there's like an object sitting on it, go 4K, because 4K is that like kind of middle ground. And if your render is entirely focused on that texture itself, go 8K, because that'll give you your maximum resolution for like everything. But I'm gonna go 4K because that's what I like doing. So you're just gonna want to download this texture here, and my internet is like a toaster, so it's gonna take like 40 seconds. But I'll be back once it's downloaded. Okay, so the texture's downloaded. It's going to be a zip file. If you don't have WinRAR or WinRAR 7-zip or whatever, download it, or you could just open it in the regular Windows File Explorer. But you're going to have these 5 or 6 textures. So I'm just going to extract these to a textures folder on my desktop, which is right here. I'm going to extract that there, and now they're extracted. And I'm going to go ahead and open Blender. Mine's already open, but if it's not, then open it. And we're going to start actually texturing. So the way I'm going to go about doing this is a very simple way by just applying it to a plane. I'm going to delete my default cube, just like always. I'm going to Shift A and add a plane. I'm going to scale up the plane a little bit, maybe to there. And then I'm going to go over here to the top left corner until my cursor turns to a crosshair, or a cross. I'm going to click and drag, and this is going to duplicate my window. And then I'm going to come over here to this little ball and grid is, click it, and then change it to shader editor. This will be where we're creating our material and editing our material. So I'm going to click new, and in 2.8 it's going to be principled. If it's 2.7 it's going to be diffuse. We need principle for PBR setup, so if you're using diffuse, then go ahead and change it to principled. And click on principled and hit Control T. Now, if you look at mine and maybe yours, hitting Control T does nothing. That's because we don't have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. So if we go up here to Edit and go down to Preferences, go to Add-ons, and then type in Node, and then make sure Node Wrangler is selected, and save Preferences. So now if we click on Principled and click Control T, we get our 3 texture nodes. The texture coordinate is basically telling the render engine or your material how to render the material, I guess, if that makes any sense. So you can either use a generated texture map, UV texture map, normal maps, and then all these that I'm not quite sure what they do, but what we're gonna use today is UV. You could use generated if you're using like a sphere or something, but generally you're going to use UV. So our image texture node, or our let's go over the mapping node first. Mapping node does exactly what it looks like. You can change the location, rotation, and scale of your material. You usually don't need to do this if you're UV unwrapping or UV mapping your material unless your object has a lot of UV islands, but that's another story. So with our image texture, we can go ahead and click open and go over to where our textures folder is, and make sure to open the color. The color is your basic diffuse, and it's what gives it color. So if we look in our render view right now, we'll see that we have our base texture. So the whole point of physically based rendering is so it's rendered like it would be in real life. So the way we do that is with certain maps. So you can have a roughness map, normal map, displacement map, ambient occlusion map, and so on. And that's how we do that is we just duplicate this image texture. So Shift D on your keyboard while selecting it duplicates it, and then go ahead and open that little folder icon right here. And then what I like to do, in the order I like to do it, is I like to go for my normal map second, and then I'm going to change the color space to non-color. This will make it to where the normal map itself, because it's like all purple and stuff, and it can affect the color of your texture, which obviously isn't good. So just go ahead and set the color space to non-color, and then Shift A and add a normal map. Not a normal map, they're entirely different nodes. So put the color into the color of the normal map, and put the normal into the normal of your principal BSDF. And then if we look, we can see, well, we should be able to see, that we now have a lot more detail in our texture. So since this is wood, the strength of the normal map being 1 is good enough, or is good, since it's wood and it's supposed to be really rough and bumpy. But if you had more of a smooth texture, you might want to decrease that, but typically you won't need to. Next text, or the next map I like using is the roughness map. So the roughness map or glossy map does the exact same thing. Glossy, since there's no glossy input on the principal, you just need to Shift A and add an invert node. If you get it from CC0 textures, usually you want to do that, but sometimes you'll have a glossy map, but you just invert it, and that inverts the blacks and whites in the nodes or the texture, and then it's basically the same thing. So just select this little folder icon and just go over here to RGH. RGH is the roughness, and now we don't need an extra node. We can just put the color into the roughness, and then we can see that our roughness value and gloss is now like it should be. So next, what I'm going to do is, typically I usually only do these nodes, because that's what PBR usually is. Ambient occlusion nodes can be used for certain things, but it doesn't make a huge difference. But now that we have this, if we can see that it's completely flat, okay? The normal map gives an illusion of being bumpy, but in reality, there's no geometry being displaced. If you want your texture to look completely realistic, that's where displacement maps come from. Displacement maps actually displace the geometry according to a texture that you apply to it. So if we come over here to our modifiers, add modifier and add a displacement, select new texture, select the make sure texture coordinates is on UV, select this little button right here, and then under image settings tab should be open. If it's not, just open it, and you'll see new and open. So go ahead and click open, and then go over to where you saved your texture to, and then DISP is our displacement map. So go ahead and open that, and we can see that it is here. But we can see that it actually hasn't displaced anything on our plane. That's because a plane by default has 4 vertices and 1 face. This is very little geometry and has pretty much nothing to displace. So what you can do is you can hit tab on your keyboard to go to edit mode, or go up here and select a option from this, and right click and click subdivide. Now I usually start off with 100, but usually that's not enough. So if we see it, we can see that it is very blocky, and also it's very large. You know, it's really tall. So we're gonna change our strength to maybe 0.01, and that seems better. But we can see it's really blocky and not a lot of detail. So we can not shade smooth. We can subdivide it maybe two more times, maybe. You could go up to 3, but now we can see that it has a lot more detail. Now we can shade smooth, and if we go into render view, we can see that it is actually there is actual geometry being displaced. So now we have this completely photorealistic wood material. We can see that the light is being diffused off of it like it should be. If I go into cycles, change my device GPU. If we go into cycles, we can see that it is working like it should be. It's a it's a physically based rendered. That's pretty much it. One thing that I do want to go over is UV mapping, because a lot of times your texture might not be like it's supposed to. So the way we UV mapping, a very simple way, is to hit tab, hit U on your keyboard, and click unwrap. For a plane you shouldn't have to do this, but for an object you might have to. This might take a few seconds depending on how much geometry you have on your object, but it shouldn't, excuse me, it shouldn't take too long. Okay, so now it's unwrapped. You probably don't even need to do that with the plane, but it's good to do that just in case. So now to actually edit our UVs, the way I like doing it is I don't even like going into render mode, because our displacement map is mapped to our UVs. That's why we set it to be UV texture coordinates. So if we go up here to this little shader ball thing that we did at the beginning and go down to our UV editor, we can see that nothing is up. That's because we have the tab in edit mode by hitting tab on our keyboard. And once we do that, we can see every individual face of our plane. So in this window, it's the same exact controls that you would use to edit your mesh. So if you hit A, it selects all, double tap A, deselects. G moves it around, S scales it. A lot of times that's what you're probably going to be doing, and R rotate it, so RX 90. You can kind of see that there. But we can see that now we have, since I scaled it up, you can see it's a lot smaller now. Well, a lot smaller on the plane. So if we look at it now, we can see that there is a lot more planks than there was before. Since it's a seamless texture, it doesn't affect anything. So, oh, one thing. This happens to me a little bit too. You can kind of see that through here it looks wet. That's because one of my nodes, for some reason, has decided to go sRGB instead of non-color like it should be. So I'm going to go ahead and change that back to non-color, and we can see that immediately that fixes it. We can see that now our wood is perfectly photorealistic. I knew something was off there. I just couldn't figure out what it was, and I looked over and it was sRGB, and I'm like, oh no. The only map that should be sRGB is your color, because it's your color. Like, that's what color is. But basically, you can go ahead and kind of move these nodes closer together for the sake of a thumbnail if you want. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did and learned something, make sure to subscribe. Leave it in the comments below. Anyways, guys, my name is Michael from Polygon Island. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.